In this video, we will show you how to replace your rear brakes, pads, and rotors on this Ford Ranger. This will be located behind your rear wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do, safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheels are off the ground. Once you've done that, the next thing we'll do is continue on to removing your center cover. You can use a pry bar for that. We'll pop this out of place, give it a quick inspection, and we can set that aside. Continue on with removing all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Let's continue on with pushing back the caliper piston. That's located inside of this area here. That piston itself will push back into this area. Now, there's a couple different ways you can push back this piston. You could either fully remove the caliper and push it back with a caliper compression tool, or while it's in place, continue on with a small pry bar. We'll make our way right into this area and carefully start pressing this back. Once you have movement from that caliper, we'll continue on to our 2 10mm headed caliper slider bolts. We'll start with the bottom one here. When you're removing these pins, you will find that the lower pin comes all the way out. As for removing the upper one with the vibration dampener on it, typically you just loosen this enough that you can remove the caliper. After that, remove the slider pin bolt from it. There we are. Now we'll be continuing on with our pry bar again. This time we're going to pry the caliper and brake pads out and away from the bracket here. When pulling it away along the bottom, typically you will find that you have a small metal lock on the outboard pad. I'll show you that in 1 second here. Let's go ahead and start pulling this out of here. Looks like the outer pad's stuck in there. That's okay. There goes that brake pad. We'll give this a quick inspection, set it aside. Now while we're holding on to the caliper itself, let's have a close look at where that caliper piston is. Double check to make sure you don't see any fluid here. If you do, it's more than likely brake fluid. If that's the case, you have to replace the caliper. This one looks good, so let's put it aside, putting no pressure on our flex hose. The brake pads are typically in the caliper itself. On ours in particular, they were pretty much still stuck in place. At this point, you just want to go ahead and set these aside for recycling. With that out of the way, let's remove the brake rotor. We'll give this a couple light bonks with the hammer here. We just want to cause some vibration to break it free. Start a lug nut on there just for safety here. Let's get this out of here. There it is, friend. Now it's time to clean the mounting point on our axle hub area here. You want to make sure it's a nice smooth surface so when you have your brake rotor on there, you won't have a brake pulsation. Let's continue on to removing each one of our 2 tins here. You can use a small hammer, pry bar, whatever you have. At this point, you can go ahead and set this one aside for recycling, and we'll do the same to the other. The next thing we'll do is clean up those mounting points where those tins were located. Let's lubricate these bracket areas. We'll use high temperature lubricant here. You only need a tiny amount. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Install your tins. We'll take this and put it in position. Start it on there. There we are. Before we can install the rotor, the next thing you want to do is apply a thin amount of anti-seize on the mating surface. Let's clean up our brake rotor. And now we can get this installed on the vehicle. Just take this and slide it on. With the rotor in place, it's time to pay attention to our caliper. Remove each one of your caliper slider pins and clean and inspect the mounting points. You want to inspect that boot, make sure it's soft and pliable, and inspect the pins. Make sure there's no rust or debris. Nice and soft. Just twist up a rag, slide it through that boot there. Try to remove as much of any of the grease that might be in there as possible. The main area of concern while you're inside this area is along where the caliper is itself. Just give that a quick wipe. That one didn't have any lubricant in it. Double check that boot real quick. Do the same to the other slider pin. At this point, I've cleaned both of my slider pins, especially down near each one of the ends where the boot will sit. By cleaning those areas, that'll help prevent moisture and debris from making its way into this area. Continue on with some high temperature caliper lubricant. We're going to go inside of each one of these boots. The most important part while you're lubricating this is along each one of the edges and along the center area. Continue on with your slider pins. We'll take these and slide them into position, making sure that the boot is perfectly situated on each side of the pin itself. I can see the pin coming out right there. We'll just make sure this goes back and forth and the boot does not slide out of position. Do the exact same thing to your other slider pin. With those lubricated, let's continue on with that high temperature lubricant. We'll lubricate this side of the piston right here and the back side of each of these two ears. Now it's time to install our brake pads. When you look at your kit, you'll find that you have two outboard pads. That's the pad that has this hook on it. Match up the brake pad. Make sure you have this pinned area facing in the same direction as your original brake pad. For the inboard pad, you'll find that you have 3 locking tabs that will fit directly into the center of that piston. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a little tug to make sure it's secure. Time for the outboard pad. You'll find that you have your locking clip, and if you were to look at the pad itself, it does have 2 tabs that protrude out a little bit. Get this on there. Double check to make sure your pads are completely seated, and now we can install this onto the vehicle. When you put your caliper on here, we're going to have to roll it in position, starting with the upper portion here. Once you have the upper portion set in, roll the lower aspect in and lock it in with this tab here. Now we'll continue on with our 2 caliper slider bolts, starting with the upper one. This one's going to be a little bit difficult to get into position. Slide it right in there. This lower one in here. Now at this point, you can go ahead and bottom these out. Okay. Once you have those snug, you can torque them to 18 foot-pounds. As you can tell, torquing this one's a little bit difficult. If you had a crow's foot, you could torque it. Otherwise, just continue with your wrench and make sure it's nice and tight. The next thing we'll have to do is make the adjustment for our parking brake shoes. To do that, you'll be coming through this port along the forward side of your backing plate. Use a small pry bar. We're looking for the adjustment cog for that emergency brake shoe. Now, once it gets to the point that you adjust it and you cannot move this rotor at all, you need to continue on by de-adjusting this, just a couple clicks here. After you can move it, continue on by tugging on your emergency brake cable. The way you'll be able to tell if you're properly adjusted is if you tug on the cable just a little bit and it holds this. And when you release it, it releases completely with no drag. At this point, it's time to reinstall the wheel. Before you do, just do a quick overall inspection. Double check to make sure everything's tight and in place. Let's get the wheel on here. Start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. Bottom them out, get the wheel safely back down on the ground, and we'll torque this to 100 foot-pounds. With the wheel safely back down on the ground, we'll torque these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. If you have a center cover, go ahead and install that now. Double check to make sure it's completely secure so it does not fall off on you while you're driving down the road. Okay friends, we've got our vehicle back together. The process for one side of the vehicle is the exact same thing as the other. Once you've completed that, make sure that you pump up your brake pedal till it's nice and firm. After that, go ahead and take the vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.